So part two of talking about decommitments today, after we talked about the decommitment of Dejon Moore yesterday. Well, he decommitted on Friday. We talked a lot about it yesterday on the Morning Pitt just to kind of get you up to speed on what was happening and where Pitt stood with offensive line recruiting. But in the wake of Dejon Moore decommitting, I did a little research that, quite frankly, I probably should have done a couple years ago because I wanted to see about the history and the background of decommitments from these June official visits. It's become... I mean, you date back to the summer of 2018 when recruits could first start taking official visits in June. You took a month that was already supercharged in terms of recruiting and cranked it up a little bit, turned it up to 11, as it were. And so you got even more commitments than they used to get because recruits are coming in on these official visits. But with all the extra commitments in June, you ended up getting a lot of decommitments. And so after Dejon Moore decommitted, put together kind of a list, put together a spreadsheet, because I make a lot of spreadsheets, tracking all of Pitt's June official visit commitments, the recruits they've gotten on these June official visits, and how many of them stuck with it. Because, look, inevitably at your tailgate or on the message board or something, there's going to be somebody who says, I don't even care about all those guys who commit in June. Half of them won't even sign with Pitt. Well, it's actually a lot more than half will sign with Pitt. So how much? How many? What do they typically lose? Should you expect decommitments every year? Are decommitments a sign that the sky is falling? I think most of us know that that's not the case, that they are not a sign that the sky is falling. But what does it mean? And how much should we read into it? And how much should you expect? Is it baked in almost that if you have 21 commitments by the end of June, how many of those guys are going to last? Well, most of them are going to last. A significant percentage. Not all, but a significant percentage. How many? And what does it all mean? And who are some of the more notable decommitments from June official visits that Pitt has had over the past few years? Let's talk about decommitments here on the Tuesday edition of the Morning Pitt, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. All right, Tuesday edition of the Morning Pitt here on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. I'm Chris Peak from Panther-Lair.com, the most comprehensive source of Pitt sports news on the internet. Pitt football, Pitt basketball, Pitt recruiting, Pitt transfers, Pitt everything, even the decommitments, all at Panther-Lair.com, and message boards to interact with hundreds and thousands of other Pitt fans. All day, every day, Pitt fans are hanging out. Panther-Lair.com, the Pitt site on the 24/7 Sports Network. And, of course, our YouTube channel here, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. It's a place to get all of our Pitt video content, these daily Morning Pitt videos every day of the week, Monday through Friday, our weekly live show that we do every Wednesday night at 8:30 p.m. We have post-game shows, press conferences, interviews, everything you could possibly need, all right here at youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. You want to make sure you don't miss any of our Pitt video content. Like this video and subscribe to youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com, and you will be locked in for it. You'll get you can turn on notifications so you get an alert every time we go live or post new content at youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. I got distracted and was thinking about something else. Let's talk about decommitments. Now, set the stage. Don't want to have to rehash too much of what you already know, but starting in the summer of 2018, the NCAA changed the rules to allow, I don't know why the dogs are barking, changed the rules to allow official visits in the month of June, or in the spring, really. It used to be you couldn't take an official visit until your senior year started. And so, recruits would take official visits through the fall and in December and January, and they'd sign their letters of intent in February. And that was the recruiting calendar. Well, they shifted a few things around. Back in 2018, so for the recruiting class of 2019, they shifted a few things around and decided to have a new a new signing period in December. So there were two signing periods, one in December, one in February, and a new official visit period. So you didn't have to wait until the fall of your senior year. You could go in the spring of your junior year, May and June, and primarily in June. Now, June was always a really popular month for recruiting and commitments. You could go back years and years. Dave Wanstead, his first year, got a bunch of June commitments. And it was always just sort of a period of time. Guys would finish their junior year of high school. They'd take some unofficial visits, check out some schools, and a lot of guys would commit in June. When they added the new element of the official visits in June, it became, like I say, it turned it up to 11. It went into hyperdrive. And now, whereas you used to get, wow, they got 5 or 6 commitments in the month of June, now you were getting double-digit commitments in the month of June. And that's what it's been basically since the summer of 2018 with that 2019 recruiting class. And you can work forward from there. Basically every year except the recruiting class of 2021, which those were the kids who, they would have been taking these official visits in June of 2020. And as you may remember, nobody was allowed to take any visits in June of 2020. So other than that, from 2019 up until now, the recruiting class of 2019 until now, you've had these big June official visit weekends. I mean, this month, Pitt got 16 commitments. And they lost one in Dejan Moore, but they got 16 commitments just in June, and it was almost all from guys who took official visits. Jerron Barksdale will be the one who committed without taking his official. And so you had this happen. You get these big numbers, and that's the way it was, in that recruiting class of 2019. They got 10 guys all on one weekend. All on one weekend. Jason Collier, Vincent Davis, Brandon Hill, Kalijah Cansey, Bryce Nelms, Davis Bevel, DeAndre Jules, Daniel Carter, Kadri Jackson, and Brandon Mack. 10 commitments in one weekend. The old Father's Day Massacre, as I started calling it. They had one official visit weekend that month in June of 2018, the first year that you could have the June official visits, and Pitt got 10 commitments out of it. It was crazy. We didn't think we would ever see anything like that again. And, I mean, we didn't up until this year when they got 10 commitments in one weekend. But we did see June commitments continue to take off. The next year, summer of 2019 for the 2020 class, they got 14 June commitments. Fast forward 2 years, they got 9 commitments in June from official visitors. In the 2023 recruiting class, so the summer of 2022, being the June after the ACC championship win, they got 17 commitments from official visitors in the month of June. The next year, they got 13. Last year, the summer of 2024, for the 2025 recruiting class, they got 17 commitments in the month of June, which is actually more than they got this year. They got 16 this year, but it's not as many as they got last year. They set a high watermark in the summer of 2022 and the summer of 2024 with 17 commitments. You get the point, right? And if you go from that 2019 recruiting class up until the 2025 recruiting class, so basically from the start of the June official visits up until last June, not counting this year, they got 80 total commitments over the course of 6 recruiting classes from 2019 through 2025. Again, the 2021 class couldn't take official visits there. So out of those 6, Pitt got 80 commitments. It's crazy. But inevitably what's going to happen when you get that many commitments, particularly at June when guys don't have to sign until December, 6 months before signing day, and you have that much volume, that many commitments, you're going to lose some guys. You're going to have decommitments, and it has happened every single year. Each of these years when they've had the June official visits and they've gotten all these commitments, these 80 commitments from June official visitors, they have lost at least 2 decommitments every year. Every year. The first year, they lost Kadri Jackson and Brandon Mack. Remember those guys? The next year, T. Denson and Henry Parrish flipped to other schools. Timothy Brown got into some legal trouble, and so they had to let him go. The 2023 recruiting class, they got Shelton Lewis and Bryce Pollock and Philip Daniels all as June official visit commitments. They all flipped to other schools. 2024 recruiting class, Chasen Johnson, Yassine Willis. You remember the running back who went to Syracuse, flipped. And then last year, they got, 17 commitments in the month of June from official visitors. 3 of those guys ended up not signing with Pitt. Demarion Folks went to Missouri. Elijah Dotson went to Michigan. And Khalil Sterling, Pitt kind of said no thanks. And sent him on his way. And so what you end up with, if you want to know what the numbers actually boil down to, out of the June official visits, since they started, not counting this year because this is still going on, 6 recruiting classes from the class of 2019 through 2025. Again, remember, 2021 doesn't count here. 80 commitments from June official visitors. Out of those 80, 16 flipped to other schools, either by their own choice, which is 13 out of the 16, or there were 3 guys that Pitt kind of said thanks but no thanks. There was an offensive lineman a couple years ago. There was, like I say, Khalil Sterling last year. Pitt kind of nudged him out of the class, and then there was Timothy Brown who had the legal issues. So 13. When it comes down to it, out of the 80 commitments in June from the June official visitors, 64 signed with Pitt. That's 80%. All right. So the next time you're at your tailgate or you're talking to somebody in June or somebody's on the message boards and they're like, I don't even care about all these June commitments. Half of these guys won't even go to Pitt. 80% of them do. 80% of them do. And some really, really good players. Brandon Hill and Kalijah Cansey were June official visitors. Jordan Addison was a June official visitor who committed during his official visit. Branson Taylor and Izzy Abanikanda were June official visitors. Solomon DeShields and Bengali Kamara and Deion Hayes. I mean, these are important contributing players. Jimmy Scott led the team led the defensive ends in sacks last year. Isaiah Montgomery made starts at offensive tackle last year. He was a June official visit commitment. Isaiah Neal, Kenny Johnson, Shadarian Harrison, Braylon Lovelace, Jordan Bass, Rasheem Biles, like B.J. Anderson, Jesse Anderson. I mean, or B.J. Williams and Jesse Anderson. I mean, these are important players. And then you even go into like the 2024 recruiting class, guys who are in their second year right now. So they've only had 1 year at Pitt, but like, Alan Bryant is a rising star at safety. Jeremiah Marcelin's going to be the backup middle linebacker. Cam Lindsey's going to be a backup outside linebacker. Caleb Holmes is one of the best offensive line prospects Pitt has signed under Pat Narduzzi. Francis Brew was a June official visit commitment. Sincere Edwards, I know he transferred, but I mean, like, that's a really good player who committed during his June official visits. And so this is you do get good players out of this group. Do you lose decommitments? Yes, you do. About 20%. And year to year, they've never lost more than 4 decommitments from their June official visits. That was the 2023 recruiting class. They had 17 guys commit, and they ended up losing 4 guys that year. Shelton Lewis, Bryce Pollock, and Phillip Daniels, as well as Colin Van Roy. Van Roy was the offensive lineman they kind of nudged out. He ended up at, I want to say like Eastern Michigan or someplace like that. Nah, I forget exactly where he went. But, Shelton Lewis flipped to Clemson. Bryce Pollock flipped to Mississippi State. Phillip Daniels flipped to Minnesota. And Daniels and Pollock are actually part of an interesting little subset here in that they transferred. Pollock went to Mississippi State and transferred to Texas Tech, and now he's somewhere. I have my transfer sheet here. Bryce Pollock transferred to Mississippi State and then Texas Tech. That's where he is now. Phillip Daniels went to Minnesota and then transferred to Ohio State this past offseason. And actually, when you break it down, so like I say, there were, out of 80 guys who committed to Pitt on their June official visits over the last, 6-7 years. Sorry, I chuckled there because my kids have this joke where they say 6-7 every time you say 6-7. I don't get it. I have no idea. And I've talked to other kids and they all think this is the funniest thing, but I don't get it one bit. So out of those 80 commitments, 16 of the guys that committed in June during their official visits ended up not going to Pitt. Of those 16, 13 were guys that Pitt wanted to hold on to. There were 3 guys that Pitt sort of nudged out of the class, like I mentioned. But of the other 13, all right, genuine flips, recruits that Pitt wanted to hold on to and ended up losing. Out of those 13, well, actually, narrow it down a little bit. We'll go down to the recruiting class of 2024, okay? Because the class of 2025, those guys aren't even on campus yet. So from 2000... Let me get the data set here for you. From the recruiting class of 2019 through 2024, okay, there were 13 recruits who committed to Pitt on June official visits and then flipped to other schools. 11 of those 13 were recruits that Pitt wanted to hold on to. 2 they nudged out. Of the 11 that Pitt wanted to hold on to who flipped to other schools, 9 of them have since transferred at least once. A couple of them have transferred multiple times. T. Denson flipped from Pitt to Kansas State, transferred to Purdue, and most recently has transferred to Jacksonville State. Henry Parrish, the running back, flipped from Pitt to Ole Miss, transferred to Miami, transferred back to Ole Miss. Chasen Johnson, the defensive back in the 2024 recruiting class. So this is a guy who was a freshman last year, committed to Pitt, flipped to UCF, transferred to SMU last December, and transferred to USC this spring. So it is interesting that of 11 guys that Pitt genuinely lost from 2019 through 2024, 9 of those 11 ended up transferring, including guys, who were like freshmen in 2024. Kadri Jackson was the one, one of those early guys, that first class. He committed to Pitt, flipped to UNC. He transferred to Georgia Southern. Brandon Mack flipped from Pitt to Ole Miss. He transferred to Houston. T. Denson, like I said, transferred twice. So did Henry Parrish. Jacavian Nonar flipped from Pitt to Maryland, the offensive lineman in the 2022 recruiting class. He transferred from Maryland to Jacksonville State. Camden Brown, do you remember that 4-star wide receiver? Flipped from Pitt to Auburn late in the process. He transferred to Georgia Southern. Bryce Pollock we mentioned. Phillip Daniels we mentioned. Chasen Johnson we mentioned. The only guys who were still at their original spot that they flipped to are Shelton Lewis, who flipped from Pitt to Clemson and probably is the biggest loss on this list of guys that Pitt lost from the June official visits. And then Yassine Willis, the running back who went to Syracuse. So now it doesn't necessarily mean anything about these guys. Oh, they flipped their commitments, so that's why they're transferring too. They can't stand by their word. It doesn't mean anything. Like, lots of players transfer. But it is interesting that 9 out of 11 recruits who flipped from Pitt after committing on their June official visits, 11 recruits who flipped that Pitt wanted to hold on to, 9 out of those 11 have since transferred at least once. And some of them have transferred multiple times. Maybe that's an interesting sort of reflection on the current state of college football. I don't know. Here's the biggest point. These decommitments are going to happen. We tell you this every year. And it's because it's been happening. 20%. On the whole, over the course of 6 recruiting classes, 20% of the guys who committed in June on their official visits ended up flipping. And they've lost at least 2 every year. So if history's any indication, Dejon Moore won't be the last flip from these guys who committed on their June official visits. Pitt will lose at least 1 more, if not 2. Because they've, out of 6 recruiting classes, they've lost 2 in 3 out of the 6. They lost 3 in 2 others. And then they lost 4 in the class of 2023. It's not a reflection on the state of the program. It's not a reflection on the coaching staff. It's not a reflection on losing to Toledo. It's not a reflection on how they handled Julian Duggar. It's not a reflection on anything. I only mentioned Duggar because he popped up on the screen there and just, it's not a reflection. It's just, it's a numbers game. You get this many commitments in this short a time based on official visits, you're probably going to have a few guys who rethink their decisions. It happens. And so prepare yourself because it'll probably happen again, at least one more time before this recruiting cycle is over. So there you go. 80%, though, are going to stick. So the next time your friend wants to tell you he doesn't care because half these guys won't even make it to Pitt, well, the truth is 80% of them will. Now, how many of them last more than 2 years at Pitt? That's another conversation altogether. I'll have to go through and make another spreadsheet for that one. All right, thanks for tuning in today. Make sure you like this video and subscribe to youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. That way you don't miss any of our Pitt video content. And then check out the website Panther-Lair.com. Pitt site on the 24/7 Sports Network. Don't forget, we get the live show tomorrow night at 8:30. And then, we, of course, we'll be taking questions for the mailbag right there at Panther-Lair.com. So get your questions in. We'll have that post up later today. We'll get as many questions as we can for Friday's mailbag. All right. Thanks so much for tuning in today. Appreciate it. I hope you've had a great week so far. Enjoy your Tuesday, and we'll catch up with you tomorrow for the Morning Pit right here on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com.